Now, who's supposed to be responsible if a 25-year-old was coddled his entire life to the point of like feeling and truly being emotionally as mature as a 13-year-old? So now no 25-year-old woman finds him attractive. No 21-year-old woman finds him attractive. The only women he can get any attention from is underage girls that are in the same emotional capacity that he's in. What do you say for those things? It's still predatory for him to be with a child. It still fucks up that child to be with somebody that's that much older than them or that much more mature than them. But at the same time, like, they're fucked up. They still need help, and so that's why I don't think that you can just toss people into boxes and that you can just throw people away or that you can just call people monsters. It does have to happen on an individual basis. And you do have to take into account the way that people are raised and where they are at in of themselves. This is why self-actualization is so important, because there's just far, far, far too, especially in this society, man, there's way too many people that have been coddled and sheltered and inexperienced or overstimulated in all of these messed up ways that have stunted them emotionally, mentally, spiritually, to such a degree that engaging in any type of addiction, whether it be sex addiction or whether it be like food addiction, shopping addiction, any sort of drug addiction, alcohol, whatever, social media addiction, any of it, it's all reflective of toxicity that has been not just allowed, but supported in this society. And those people are victims as much as they're victimizing anyone else, and like, man, it's such a hard subject. I don't blame people that have hate for especially pedophiles or for any sort of sex abuser or for any sort of abuser at all. Like the people that are like, kill your local heroin dealer and stuff. Like, I get it. I totally get it. But those concepts don't reflect a very solid understanding of the society in which we live and the things that have supported a space for that type of behavior to exist. And like, I talk about pedophiles a lot because of my experience with them. I grew up with them. I grew up with them. Like I know people that are pedophiles, and they're not monsters. They're just really fucked up people. I don't view them as any different than, the heroin addicts that I know or the alcoholics that I know. It's not any different when it comes to the way that they're being victimized by themselves. The difference is that it's so much more important that we know these things and that we talk about these things and that we engage with these things and that we carefully handle these things, because an alcoholic is usually only hurting themselves, right? I mean, technically, my dad died an alcoholic and left us without a dad my entire life. I never got to truly meet him. And that fucked me up my entire life. But that's still different than having a dad that is actively molesting you. Yeah, he's hurting himself, but he's also damaging a child's life. It's all the same. My life was damaged regardless. And it's on the individual what they take of those experiences and what they make of them. But when I really can't even separate them. I really can't, because kids that I know that have grown up without a parent or because of drug and alcohol addiction, or had an abusive parent because of those things, and kids that I know that grew up with a a pedophile parent, or like people around them, like whatever it was in their environment having those things, like they all tend to get fucked up the same sorts of ways, to be honest, and have to work through the same sorts of healing. It all looks different for the individual, but all of this stuff fucks people up. All of it. And nobody's an island in it. There isn't, like I said, even if you're like a 17-year-old or 18-year-old boy, 16-year-old boy, and you're, only watching like weird Japanese waifu porn of, little kids, like, and it's cartoons, you're still engaging and supporting a system that is predatory. And the ways that our societies and cultures tend to validate those things or make excuses for those things or normalize those things makes it that much harder for people to recognize how monstrous those things are. And so often people do recognize how monstrous those things are, but it only forces them into hiding and into their own shame and guilt. It doesn't actually help them to not engage in those things, and like if somebody somebody that I cared and respected and who cared for and respected me hadn't been willing and vulnerable enough to explain sex addiction to me the way that they did, and their concern for me about it, I wouldn't have gone to the 12-step program. She told me about it. I didn't even know that those things existed. And had I not gone through that, as much as I was already trying to process those things, I was also still just actively engaging in them. And the more that I was, the more that it was hurting me. The reason that she started to know, she didn't know about my porn addiction. She noticed me actively engaging in risky sexual behaviors. And that, like I said, had come secondary to the porn addiction. The porn addiction was easy for me to hide. There'll come a day where, those things won't be so easy to hide because everything that's done on the internet will eventually be revealed. And that's also another important thing about this, because I think that, like, dude, our society is so fucked up. It's so fucked up, but like and I've added to this, like, I take responsibility for this. I talk about these things from a point of responsibility. I'm not dogging anyone. I've been just as guilty, and I'm actively trying to work these things out and heal from these things myself so that I'm no longer engaging in these systems. Because the society is itself addicted to porn, and sex sells, right? Why does sex sell? Well, because when you take something so sacred and make it casual and then use it to exploit things, you are like I said, like so many, and when you've raised a society of people that are so shallowly identified by such things, you are subconsciously triggering those things in them, and like it's intentional. It's been intentional. I've said this in other things too, but like the reason that things are the way they are isn't just because like people just keep getting worse and everything's always bad and people are inherently evil. That's not true. That's not true. The people who wrote that into a book and who have been preaching that for the last 2,000 years are the same people that wrote these other scripts in, and they know the subconscious of an individual, and they knew how to break down an individual in order to get them into a position of being able to be exploited these ways. It is not natural. None of this is natural. We don't live in a natural society. None of this is good or okay. It wouldn't be this way if we lived in a natural society. In a natural society, it doesn't, you watch the animals. If you want to know what natural looks like, watch the animals, see what they engage in and what they do. Generally speaking, each breed of animal, each type of animal has a way of recognizing who is more vulnerable and who requires more care and what it takes to strengthen and grow, and those that prove to be too vulnerable or too weak or too chaotic and messed up and selfish or any of those things to work within the greater community are generally cut out of it. It looks a lot of different ways for different animals. Some animals just kill those animals. Some animals literally just cut them out of the groups, and then those animals are forced to wander alone until they find what they can do for themselves. Sometimes they can join other groups. Sometimes they don't because they can't get over whatever the issues that they have is. And those things happen for different reasons. Like there's studies of like lions who have gotten kicked out of their especially male lions who've gotten kicked out of their prides. Generally, that's part of the process anyway, so that they can go find their own prides. But ones that aren't able to find a pride have, especially in more recent years, started engaging in cannibalism, which is something that they'd never seen lions engage in prior, or homosexuality, or different types of like violent behavior and stuff. And the thing with all of that is that, like, I mean, there's also animals that engage in homosexuality naturally, and it's not an unnatural thing, and they're still part of the community. There's just, that's, again, you can't throw people into boxes. I've met people who I'm in the 12-step program who actively engaged in homosexual behavior, not because they were homosexual, but because they were perverts. I've met plenty of homosexuals that are just homosexual, and it's not perverted for them to be that way. In fact, it'd be perverted for them to be any other way. Like, I had a best friend who was gay who like could not consider, like, he grew up with his sisters, he grew up with his mom. The idea of being with a woman felt perverted to him because there was nothing about being with a woman that seemed natural, that and to push himself into a point of being unnatural or to push a woman to be with him in a natural way wouldn't be helpful. Now, I do think that everybody can engage in any type of sexuality. Human beings can engage in any type of sexuality, and it doesn't define their actual sexuality, or their sexual identification, rather. That's how it is. Like I said, there's men who are straight, there's women who are straight, but they can still engage in homosexual acts. There's homosexual people who can engage in heterosexual acts, and neither makes them either or. But the point of self-actualization is so that an individual can know for sure in of themselves, is this something that I'm doing out of a perversion, or is this something that I'm doing because it's what's natural? What's natural for the individual is always going to be what's best. And it's not for the community to determine those things, because the community isn't, it's an illusion outside of the individuals that comprise it. The issue that we have in our community at large is that it's comprised of individuals that don't know themselves, that aren't self-actualized, that are perverted in all of these different ways because of the spaces that we've created or that have been created for us in order to allow us to identify ourselves by shallow aspects of ourselves, by the shallow aspects, and not to know ourselves any deeper than those things. And we continue to build a society where that's acceptable, where, oh, you don't have to get to know yourself and be happy within yourself. Go get that surgery. Go do that thing. Go, be with that person, then be with that person, then be with that person. Go spend all that money. Go do these things, because that's what'll make you happy. And nobody's happy. And nobody understands why nobody's happy, and everybody's just degrading. It's not natural. It's not how it's supposed to be. In their natural societies exist right now in the world today. They just tend to be more scattered now than ever because of the prevalence of this toxic social scheme, and like people in one country that has been super suppressed, who didn't even have the concept of self-actualization, now have access to the full-blown freedom of being able to engage in all types of who knows what. And then there becomes the allure of it. When you don't know yourself, the first step is always going to be to know yourself. If you don't know yourself and then start to get to know yourself, it's always going to be the shallow things first. When you dive into the water, you hit the surface first before you go deep. It's just how it works. You can't, when you're a baby, you drink breast milk. You don't get to just start off on solid foods. It's not how it works. So like, you can't just lift 600 pounds right off the bat. You have to work towards it. Like all of these things are a process that was supposed to be like nature itself has created its own sustainable system. It just works within nature. That's the reason that time is the way that it is. That's the reason that things process the way that they process, why seasons are the way they are, why we're born babies and then turn into children and then turn into teenagers and then turn into adults. It's supposed to be part of that natural process that we go through, that development of self-actualization. It's just that has been removed from this progressively from our society intentionally in order for those that have access to those things, have always had access to those things, the people, they've continued to hold on to that power and then break down that power for everyone else to dissuade those things. The Bible was literally written and spread through the Crusades across the planet in order to remove people from themselves and their capacity for self-actualization. And it did so, and as do other religions, but even more so, it's not even other religions as much as it is other forms of terrorism, to convince people that this is the way. This is the way. You don't know the way yourself, and we can't trust what you would consider best for yourself because it doesn't fit into our standard for society. The issue is that society isn't supposed to be one huge conglomerate of the same thing. It's supposed to be a whole bunch of all of these different pieces all working together the way they work. When you have a well-functioning machine, it has individual parts that are made up of individual parts. And all of those littler individual parts work very differently than each other, but they all work in tandem in order to make that one larger individual part work the way it's supposed to work. And then those larger individual parts all work together in order to make the whole machine work. That's what our culture and community is supposed to look like. But it doesn't look like that because of the very specific, indoctrinations that have been put into this society. And we are all victims of it. So when it comes to specifically sex addiction, which is what I'm talking about, even in my own personal experience, the reason I was driven towards porn addiction and sex addiction in the first place was to claim a control over my own sexuality, in part because of the trauma that I had experienced that had stolen my innocence, but also because of the misogyny that I was raised with that had trained me to believe that as a woman, I wasn't capable of intellectual processing, let alone self-discipline, let alone worthy of individualism. And I struggled with that because I inherently felt those things and it didn't seem to line up with who I was supposed to be as a woman. And so I took on a toxic masculinity that had been handed down to me because it fit my concept of my identity better. My identity being completely natural. My identity being, well, I am a thinking person and I am capable of logic and I'm not just emotionally driven and I can do more than just have babies, especially, I had been told by 3 doctors before the time I was 24 that I wouldn't be able to have kids, that if I did want kids and if there was ever going to be a chance of me being able to get pregnant, it would take a lot of different types of medications and hormones and this whole process in order for me to even be synced up in order to be able to have kids. So I, for all intents and purposes, up until I was fully mature, was under the impression that I wasn't even capable of being a woman because I'd been raised to believe that that's what women were for. So then I like took it onto myself to be like, okay, well then, I'm okay with adoption. And if I wanted to have a family, that's the way that I would go. But it still hurt me so deeply internally. And it drove a lot of that sex addiction. And I don't know if that makes sense to people or if that seems silly, but for me, like I was raised where I was literally taught multiple times that I was a lock and that men are the key and that a master key is able to open all of the different locks. But a lock that can be opened by all the different keys isn't a very good lock. So my sexual identity was inherently reduced to being expressed only through the validation of a greater man, and like that was what I was supposed to be looking for, was like a superior male that I could submit to in order to be his one and only. And it's not that I disagree with those concepts even fully, but the way that they were taught to me was extremely fucked up, and what it did to my identity was extremely fucked up. I don't think that's the right way to go about teaching somebody to respect themselves and to treat themselves with, dignity. In fact, it had the opposite effect. And so my sexuality became very reflective of the boys of my brothers and of the men, their friends, and of the men that I grew up with, and the men that, were grown men that were interested in me when I was a child, and all of those different things. I started looking like, well, what is it that men want? Okay, men want a super sexually active woman. They want a woman that's willing to give herself in these ways. They want a woman that'll do this, but won't do this, and that does this, but doesn't do this. Okay. And my entire identity became completely revolved around what it was that a man wanted out of me. There was nothing that was healthy or helpful about that. And I just think that like all of these things, I think I'm getting close to the end of the video. All of these things, man, I should probably just make another one about this because this is like a whole ass subject. What I was thinking about before I even got into this was how hard boys have it and how hard men have it when it comes to not becoming sexual predators, especially of children, because of the way that society is. And because like every pedophile that I've ever known has, like I said, I've known a lot, and every one of them had been assaulted when they were children. And they had also been victimized in such a way that they weren't fully matured by the age that they were, so that there was an appeal to someone younger. Like I, as a mature person, like there literally isn't an appeal to somebody that much younger than me. Yeah, I dated somebody that was 5 years younger than me this year, and even that was hard to swallow because there was just a few different things where I was like, you got to experience more before you can really be on my level. And like, but I didn't think that it was like inappropriate for me at 33 to be with somebody that was 28. But I think it would be a little more inappropriate. I don't think it'd even be inappropriate for him at 28 to be with somebody that was 23, but I think it would be inappropriate for him at 28 to be with somebody that was 21. I think he would feel the same way that I felt. He wouldn't be illegal. He wouldn't be with a child, but he would find like, oh yeah, this person just is not capable of being as mature as I am. Where when the focus of sexuality, especially for men, isn't about finding an equatable partner or a partner you can commit to at all, but is just about receiving whatever pleasure you can get, well, then there's definitely going to be an appeal to somebody who has a high sexual, like vulnerability, and who's willing to do anything, and who has all of their youth and liveliness and all of the high energy and all of the immaturity and ignorance that allows them to be willing to do basically anything. We are literally creating predators by not having a self-actualized community. Like it, that I mean, the men that preyed on me, like I got it. I knew why they were preying on me. I played those things. I exploited the shit out of myself when I was 14, 15, 16 online for those purposes, because I had been trained. I already knew what it was the men were looking for. I already knew what they were attracted to in me and why and how to offer those things. I was preying on them in the same way that they were preying on me. I was actually preying on them even more, up until the point that I started getting actively groomed by one. And then I realized how fucked up the shit was. That's when I realized I was a child, because the other ones had treated me like I was 18 or 19, right? They treated me like I was mature. They treated me like I was the grown adult I was trying to act like. But I realized with the one that was trying to groom me that he saw me as a child because I was a child, and that he was just looking for younger children through me. And it warped me. It fucked me up. I mean, it's something that I eventually will talk about. Maybe I'll talk about in an immediate another video. I don't know for sure. But these are things I wanted to talk about just in general, because like, oh man, there's so much. I know this video is going to end soon. It's just going to cut off. But like, it's something we're all dealing with in this society because of how prevalent it's become. You know, it doesn't just take being a sex addict in order to be affected by these things. There's been plenty of people I've been with that weren't sex addicts that were negatively impacted by my sex addiction. So, you know, and just as much, I'm a woman, but that doesn't make me any different than a man in the sense of being capable of becoming addicted or afflicted with anything, becoming a predator, any of that. Man, there's so many. That's the thing. I know so many dudes you would never even know, that when they were, 14, 15, 16, 17, they were having sex with grown ass women. Those women were predators. Those women were pedophiles. Those women were fucked up, taking advantage of a child, exploiting a child, sexually abusing a child. But it was taught to those men that they were men now. That's what made them men. The older of a woman you can be with, the more mature and stuff like that when you're younger. And then it flips. When you're older, now you want to be with a younger one. And that's what makes you a man. We're doing this in our society. It's not just that these people are monsters. It's that it's something, it's a sickness we are cultivating. And I think it's very important that we point those things out. Not that every person actively abusing a child shouldn't be held accountable for that. And I think that there is certain levels of predatory behavior and perversions that I don't think anything's beyond change. I don't think anything's beyond healing, but I think that there's some people that have actively given so much into their own minds in those ways that they will never receive healing. So I'm not saying that it's something that like every single person that's out there, whether they're a murderer, a thief, or a liar, or a predator, or whatever, that they, should just get some psychological care and that we need to coddle everybody. I don't think it's like that either, but I think that there is fine lines within this giant gray area. I don't think things are as black and white as we tend to make them seem. I think that they'd be a lot more black and white if we became self-actualized enough individually in order to properly assess these things and address these things. And I guess that's about all I can fit in for right now. So that's a lot of cancelable information, I'm sure, but I don't have a problem backing up anything that I've said with my own experience and opinion. And it is just my opinion. I'm not a certified psychologist by any means, but in my experience, this is what I have found. And these are the things that I care to acknowledge, because I don't think that throwing the baby out with the bathwater is ever the best option. And I think that all people have redeemable qualities that are meant to benefit our society. And that's what we should be trying to reach in individuals. And that is the reason that any sort of predatory behavior, as what, like me going out to a bar just to find a dude to fuck, knowing that I'm never going to interact with him again, that I literally just want to have sex, that's predatory. You know what I mean? Like all of it, it's so predatory. It's fucked up. And so much of our society is based on predatory behavior and shallow pleasure. And it's not beneficial